We just want to ask her why she allowed a 21-year-old convicted sex offender to take classes in this school.
Tonight, a Project Baltimore investigation into a registered sex offender at a Baltimore County high school.
I was like, this guy is a sex offender. Why is he here?
A student who says she warned school administrators that he was dangerous.
There's no way to deny it now. Why did you let this happen?
Now that 21-year-old man is back in jail, charged with another sexual assault.
How could you? Now I'm sitting with a victim that's my child, and I want to know why.
School leaders aren't talking.
When they could have stopped it here.
As lawmakers vow to never let this happen again.
Sex offenders have no place in our schools, period.
This is a Project Baltimore town hall, registered and enrolled.
Welcome to this Project Baltimore Town Hall.
And I'm Chris Papps. Tonight we'll be discussing serious concerns over student safety, a Fox 45 Project Baltimore investigation into how a 21-year-old convicted and registered sex offender was taking classes and was enrolled at Parkville High School.
We want to thank everyone who came out tonight, all these concerned residents, and we want to introduce our panel as well tonight before we get started. Joining us tonight is State Delegate Nino Mangione, who has introduced legislation as a result of this investigation. Baltimore County School Board Vice Chair Julie Henn and School Board member Lily Rowe, who are both working to change school policies.
We are also joined by Baltimore County Councilman David Marks, and we did invite Baltimore County School Superintendent Dr. Darrell Williams to come tonight and to address the community. Soon after we invited him, he wrote back and said that he would not be willing to attend.
All right, and clearly we are here tonight because there are such important topics on the table. Registered sex offenders, they can't be teachers, they can't be superintendents, they really can't work in the school system at all. But Chris, through your long investigation on this topic, you found students can be registered sex offenders in Baltimore County schools.
Now, we first heard about this on social media. Parents and students at Parkville High School outraged that a registered sex offender was taking classes, sitting next to their daughters and their sons, some as young as 14 years old, at Parkville High School, and these parents and students were never informed about it. In late 2017, this man, Santino Sudano, was arrested, charged with second-degree rape in an incident involving a 13-year-old girl. He pleaded guilty to second-degree assault and a sex offense in the fourth degree. By the fall of 2018, Sudano was a registered sex offender. He was also a student taking classes at Parkville High School. When you met him at Parkville High School, you never would have thought that he was a convicted sex offender.
No.
For fear of retaliation, this Parkville High School student asked not to be identified. She told Project Baltimore she knows Sudano. You just thought he was another student?
Yeah.
But the now 21-year-old Sudano was not just another student.
I just feel guilty because I didn't do anything when I had the chance, and now look what happened.
A registered sex offender wants to enroll in a Maryland public school, state law requires they have written permission. Baltimore County Schools told Fox 45 that permission came from Parkville's principal, Maureen Astorita.
When I look into...
This is her at a recent board meeting. When Astorita allowed Sudano in school, students and parents were not alerted. This student says when she found out, she and others told Parkville administrators they did not feel safe.
I was like, this guy is a sex offender. Why is he here? And one of the resource officers or one of the administrators, they were like, oh, he has a right to an education. And in my head, I'm thinking, what about me? What about all the other vulnerable girls in this school?
But Sudano is no longer at Parkville. He's not in school because he's here in jail, charged with 1 count of second-degree rape, 2 additional counts of a sexual offense and assault. Charged again with sexually assaulting another underage girl while he was a student at Parkville High School.
My heart broke when I saw that.
According to the charging documents, the 15-year-old alleged victim also attended a Baltimore County school. During the investigation, detectives confirmed Sudano was attending Parkville High School. Police were given a copy of the principal's letter granting Sudano permission to attend Parkville. And according to the police report, that letter expired in May of 2019, 7 months before he was arrested for a second time. Yet, he was still going to the school.
My name is Chris Pabst with Fox 45.
Despite that police report, county schools told us the principal followed all policies and procedures.
So you're inviting us inside?
But we had questions, and our repeated requests for an interview were denied.
All right, come on in.
So we went to the school.
Hi, looking for Principal Astorita?
We were told the principal was in a meeting in her office. We were asked to wait. So we did.
Does she just have 1 minute? We just want to ask her why she allowed a 21-year-old convicted sex offender to take classes in this school.
She's in a meeting with a teacher.
Yeah, we feel like this is a question that parents and students deserve to have answered.
I'm just relaying the message from her, and I know.
So we're willing to wait as long as we have to for her to get done with her meeting and come out and talk with us.
I'll pass that on to her.
Okay, so we can wait?
You can wait.
Okay.
We waited for less than 2 minutes, but Principal Astorita refused to come out and speak with us. Instead, she sent a message.
She will not be meeting with you. I don't know how else to make that any clearer to you.
It's wrong. Like, these girls and these boys, just every student at Parkville deserves to be safe. And with everything that's going on with the school shootings and all the other horrible things that happen with schools, the last thing we need to worry about is a sex offender in our classrooms right next to us.
And Chris, you have done weeks and weeks of reporting just like that. I think all of us, I've heard from people across the state, outraged that this has happened. They can't believe it's happened. I know we all watch these stories with our mouths open. So how does it happen, and what does state law say about having registered sex offenders in our schools?
Well, according to the state law, registered sex offenders are not allowed to be on school property unless they have permission. And there's just 3 ways that they can get permission: from the principal, from the school board, and from the superintendent. In this instance, Baltimore County Public Schools tells us that that permission came from the principal. Now, after we air these stories, Mary, a number of state laws have been introduced. One of the delegates who has introduced a state law is Nino Mangione, who's joining us now. Tell us a little bit about what your state law says if it were to be passed. What would it do?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Mary. Appreciate you having us here today. Very simple. The bill says, and I have to mention Delegate Joe Boatler and Senator Kathy Klausmeyer have a bill in as well, and it does the same thing pretty much. And it says if you're a convicted sex offender, you will not be allowed to attend class in the state of Maryland. Very simple. This is geared towards high schoolers, but that is something that we believe has to get passed. It is the most important thing that when it comes to education, first and foremost, is school safety. That's, without going too much into the weeds, very simple bill. That's the gist of it right there.
Now, in Maryland, the state constitution mandates that every student has the right to an education. So how does your bill handle that?
So basically, you're right. It says in the bill that if you have an offense like this, we have to, as a state, find alternative means of education for that student, but they cannot attend the general campus with the students.
I think as just a member of the public, and I will hear from our audience tonight, I was shocked. I didn't realize that this is what our law says and the way our current law is. I want to ask Councilman Marks, do you support this legislation, and why?
Absolutely. I think it's a common sense piece of legislation. And, you know, I think unfortunately it gets to the issue that it tends to be a culture of permissiveness in Baltimore County Public Schools. It is not just this issue. It's the fact that we have a teacher who's assaulted at Loch Raven High School. We never find out what happens to the student who assaults the teacher. It's the fact that we have all these other issues dealing with discipline. We never get to the truth about that. So I absolutely applaud Delegate Mangione and totally support that piece of legislation.
Now, Ms. Henn, as this is going through Annapolis and other bills are moving through Annapolis, the school board is also looking at changing policies and addressing those concerning sex offenders and other students who have committed crimes.
That's correct. We have policies and rules that address employees, that address adults in the school who are non-students, I should say, this was an adult, non-students in our schools, but yet there's a hole in our policies in this case. So when I learned of this, my first question was, how did this happen? And what do we need to do to address it? So our policy review committee has directed staff to bring us all of the policies, all of the rules that allowed this to happen so that we can change those and close those loopholes so that this never happens again. Sex offenders do not belong in our schools, period. We have to close those loopholes. I fully support Delegate Mangione's legislation. I think whatever actions we need to take, we have to take to ensure that this does not happen again.
And Ms. Rowe, if I can bring you into the conversation, how much was your phone ringing off the hook when Chris's story started to air? I'm sure it was nonstop.
Well, so I live in the Parkville High School zone, in addition to it being a school that I represent. So I actually had, when I first found out about this, I found out about it on Facebook because I live in the community, so I'm in the social media world in there. And the first thing I did when I saw the post on Facebook was email the rest of the board and email the superintendent and ask questions about this. And then we got into Christmas break, and I had students showing up at my house during Christmas break because the Parkville High School bus stops right in front of my house, and my nephew goes to the school, and he came to me too, and he said, look, this is what is happening. And it wasn't shortly thereafter that it came out in the news media, and the first thing I posted on Facebook about it was, we need a state law, because the only way that we can guarantee that this is never going to happen again is if it's not, it shouldn't be possible to grant permission for something you would never want to happen. So a state law that says out and out, this can't happen, is what we need, because that is the only way it's going to guarantee this never happens again.
Well, the good news, the state law is in the works, and we have lawmakers here tonight to address that specifically. So if you could introduce yourself to our audience and tell us about your piece of legislation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm Delegate Joe Boatler, and I actually represent the 8th District, and I'm also a graduate of Parkville High. And so when we had heard this, we were very concerned about the reaction that we were getting from the superintendent. He seemed to be in hiding about this issue, and this is a horrible thing that's not only happened to one young lady, but now it's happened to several others who are filing charges. So I, along with Kathy Klausmeyer, she put a bill in the Senate. We are sponsoring on the House, along with Harry Bendari and Delegate Carl Jackson. So we're working in a bipartisan manner, and our bill accomplishes the same thing that Delegate Nino Mangione had put in. It's an emergency piece of legislation, and we're hoping that we can get this through the legislature, because I think it's something that we've got to do.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm glad. And do those two pieces of legislation have to reconcile and then the governor can sign them? Is that how it would work?
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Both pieces of legislation could pass, and then once they go to the Senate, depending on what happens with the Senate bill, when the Senate bill comes to the House, yeah, somewhere along the line, and we may just blend them all in together.
Right. I mean, it makes sense to work together and get this done for the students and the families of Parkville and the rest of Maryland. So thank you all very much for coming and talking to us about it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate
you guys coming tonight.
I have a letter as well.
Yes, please tell me.
So I'm Delegate Kathy Shalega, and I am on with Delegate Mangione's bill. And I've sent a letter to the superintendent of public schools asking, has there been a consequence for anyone who allowed this to happen? And we need to know that. We know that we are taking effective steps to stop this from happening again, but what will happen? Who will pay a consequence for the victimization of these girls?
Have you heard back?
Have not. I just sent the letter Friday, but I can guarantee you that my colleagues here, working with the Baltimore County delegation, will ensure that we do get an answer.
No, I did. Yes, and I did speak with you as well before, and you had said that you had similar concerns about the superintendent.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this town hall. As an educator and district head representing Parkville High School, we're so glad that what you guys have been doing. We'll do anything and everything in our power to restore the character, commitment, and confidence of Baltimore County public school system. Is Delegate Boatler and Carl Jackson and Senator Klasmar and all of us have been doing. There should not be place as an educator to the sex offender in our school, period, no matter what. You want to say something?
Sure.
And Delegate Jackson, you have spoken to the superintendent, correct?
Yes. We all, when we first heard about the situation, Delegate Boatler, Senator Klausmeyer, Delegate Harry Bhandari, we all had a conference call with the superintendent and encouraged him to be public, you know, to the extent that he could, you know, to kind of let the public know what happened. We did this on numerous occasions, you know, to no avail. We will continue to encourage and ask the superintendent to be transparent to the extent that he can about what happened, so that parents who send their children to Parkville can trust that, you know, their kids will be in good hands and that this situation will not happen again. So we've been on top of this from the beginning, and we'll keep on pushing for transparency.
And we do have to say, we invited Dr. Williams. We said that at the top, but he did not come tonight, and he has not been willing to sit down for an interview ever about this at the very beginning, nor now.
Well,
That's a real problem. He's a public official. We pay his salary.
Yeah.
He should be answering their questions.
We did have a chance to interview him down in the Maryland General Assembly. And I think you guys were there, your cameras were there. So we did have a chance to interview him, and like I kept pushing him to please, you know, say something, make a public statement about what was going on. And, you know, that's all we can do is just keep encouraging and trying to push them to be transparent so that parents can know that their kids are safe when they attend high school.
I just have one more question. Did you guys ever get an answer as to why he has decided not to get out in front of this, talk to us about this situation and address it? Did he ever say why?
Well, what he's saying is legally is some things that he can't talk about, you know, and we understand that he can't get into specifics. But what we ask, the things that he can talk about is how did this occur? You know, who made the decisions? You know, how did, you know, so that people can understand what was the thought process going into this. And so, you know, I will continue to push him to please say something to the extent, like I said, that he can. I know he has some legal obligations that he can't, you know, say certain things, but I will continue to ask him to be transparent about what's going on. Parents need to know, again, that their kids are safe.
And I want to ask you,
high school.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it looks like a cover-up when we can't get straight answers from the superintendent. And, you know, we had an incident last week at Loch Raven High School where a teacher was showing a slide of President Trump with a Nazi sign and a hammer and sickle saying they're familiar, they're the same thing. And so my letter asked for answers on that. The answer that was put out was it's a personnel issue and they can't discuss it. We're not going to accept that. That is not acceptable.
The state funds part of Baltimore County schools. You should have some say and some power here to have some response from the superintendent.
Right. You can't just say it's a personnel issue and we're not going to talk about it. Parents deserve answers, and these legislators here and the folks on the panel we're going to push until we get an answer, but it's not okay. This is not okay, and you can't just ignore Project Baltimore. You can't ignore Chris when he knocks on the door.
And I just have one more question, and then we're going to pivot on to another topic here. As far as we are aware, the people who made this decision at Baltimore County Public Schools are still in the same positions that they were when this decision was made. Do you believe that parents can have the assurance that their kids are safe in school and this isn't happening again when the people who made this decision are still there?
And that's part of my question. Has there been a consequence? What changes have you made aside from the bills we put in? And Delegate Boatler, I know, has done more as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's one of the questions I really pressed him hard on. First off, I wanted to know who was responsible. And he did tell us that. It said it was the principal, the police officer, and 2 people from central headquarters. And I really pressed him about, okay, then what are we going to do about this? How are they going to be held accountable? Because I'll be honest with you, if I had a kid that was in that school right now, I would not trust to send them there. I'd be very worried about their safety. And this is something that it's not only happening here, we saw it happen in Montgomery County now. Right. So this is an issue that is becoming statewide very quickly, and I suspect that there's even more that are out there that we don't even know about yet. And but he, you know, he's just refusing at this point to give us the answers that we need. He says when it comes to dealing with the principal and it comes to dealing with a police officer and the 2 people at the central headquarters, it's an administrative issue, and to me it's not. It's a crime that was committed.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. We're glad you're involved.
We're going to pivot now to...
Chris, I wanted to mention we did get an answer from Dr. Williams. I did ask him that question, and he answered it when Senator Klausmeier held that conference meeting with us. And when I asked him why you weren't more transparent, why you didn't hold a meeting, it was a very shameful answer, but he said that he was worried that people get more upset. They were in the room, they remember. People get more upset if you are not allowed to talk about certain things because of confidential, whatever. And it was one of the most shameful answers I could have ever heard from somebody in that type of position. He should have come out right away and started taking questions. Everybody in this audience would have appreciated it a lot more if everybody, including the school board, including the principal, including the superintendent, would have come out and held a town hall meeting and said, this is what happened, this was our fault, we should have never let it happen, we're sorry, we're never going to sleep right because of this, and we're going to make sure it never happens again. And that's not what he said. What he said was we were afraid that people would get upset because we weren't allowed to talk about certain things. That's exactly what he said in that meeting last week.
Now, we just heard from 5 elected delegates who are wondering why the superintendent is not addressing this issue or the principal is addressing this issue. But we have 2 school board members right here in front of us. Ms. Henn, go first. What is your thought on what you just heard from the 5 delegates?
So I will say that Ms. Rowe and I are here tonight, and that says something about our commitment here and the fact that we are here. We have been here. We are committed to transparency. We're committed to accountability, and that's what we expect from our superintendent and his staff. And we have made those expectations known. He does report to the board, and we will be evaluating him, and as any superintendent would be, on his performance, and those are our expectations. So I'll leave my comment at that.
Ms. Rowe?
I think that it's important to realize that the Board of Education operates with the information that we're given. The moment that board members found out about this, we started responding with questions. And just like the superintendent or anyone else in the school system, there are things that legally, under the state and federal laws, we're not allowed to talk about because of privacy laws. But that doesn't mean that we're not looking into it ourselves and expecting answers.
All right, well, even though Sudano had permission to attend school, something happened in November that was quite dramatic. A Parkville student came forward, Chris, and you've reported on this, saying that alleging that Sudano had raped her. She did not press charges, though, but she warned administrators at that time. She went to school administrators and warning that this man was a dangerous student. I call him a man because he was 21 years old. That student spoke to Project Baltimore, Chris, and we just aired some of those. She's incredibly brave to have come forward. She wants to save other students.
She wants to save other girls.
Yeah.
There are significant red flags here. So the timeline is in late 2017 with the initial charges against Santino Sudano. He pled guilty in April of 18, went on the sex offender registry, and went back to Parkville. In November of 2018, police were called to Parkville High School for another reported rape. And in that situation, a police report was filed, but charges were not. The girl had told us that she was scared and she didn't want her family to find out at the time what was going on. But he was still allowed to stay in that school with administrators knowing he was a registered sex offender and with a second underage girl coming forward. So we're going to pivot here to our panel. Mr. Marks, you had seen these stories. You had made comments about this during council meetings when people had come talking about this and what the council could possibly do. What was your reaction when you had seen that there was then a second underage girl that comes forward? And simply because she doesn't press charges, I'm guessing, is the reason they still kept Sudano in the school. But I also want to give an update. Yesterday we found out she now is pressing charges. What was your reaction to this?
Well, I'm glad she's pressing charges, and certainly commend her for that courageous action. It's extremely upsetting. It's a real pattern that needs to be rectified. I will tell you that the county council met with Dr. Williams in October. And we had a number, and certainly this is before a lot of this broke, we had a lot of concerns dealing with discipline, dealing with the conditions that our educators are working under. And we asked for improvements and we never get responses. So I think there is, again, this culture in which we shield communication, we protect the bureaucracy, and we don't let the public know what steps we're taking to make it more accountable.
Ms. Henn, should he have been allowed to stay in that school after she came forward and warned administrators?
Having not been in that situation, I believe that those who made the decision felt that they made the right decision. Hindsight 2020, absolutely not.
Do you guys, what answer have you two been given? I know that you have tried to get answers about how this happened and what the thought processes were. Ms. Rowe, what were you told, or is there anything that you can share with us about why he was allowed to stay in that school when a second underage girl came forward and filed this police report? I mean, the Special Victims Unit went to Parkville High School. They were in the school interviewing her about an accused rape of an already registered sex offender.
So thus far, I know more from the news media than I know from our school system.
Right.
It's a problem.
Right. And it's a real issue. I can understand the school system not getting into issues about naming individuals. But when we ask for aggregate statistics, we're not given those. And I don't understand why the school system takes such steps to guard that privacy aspect. When we ask for aggregate statistics, we ask for overall policy changes, we're never given the answer.
Besides which, the board actually has a right to this information. There's nothing the school system, there's no information the school system can have that if it needs to be shared with board members, that it can't be shared with board members, because we're bound to keep confidentiality. So the fact that I'm sitting here and I don't know any more than anyone else in this room is a problem for me.
So how can that change? How can we have more transparency so this doesn't happen again? And as board members, you have the information that you need to do your job.
I'm really looking forward to seeing the governor's new Inspector General of Education in action. I just can't wait to see what he's going to do to help board members hold school systems accountable.
To the extent of what you guys, to the extent of what you two know now as the vice chair and a member of the school board, what do you guys want to see happen?
I want to see a state law. I want to see a state law because I think what a lot of the public doesn't realize is that in our school system, when we look at our discipline policies, we have state and federal laws that compete against one another. And our discipline policies as they sit right now functionally aren't really good enough, but they are the strictest discipline policies we can have under state and federal law. So because there are state and federal laws that tie the local board's hands for what we can do and the choices that we can make, this is an extremely egregious situation, but there are other situations that would concern the community if they knew about it that are the way they are because state law requires it to be that way and federal law requires it to be that way.
And Ms. Henn, what do you want to see happen?
I want to see tougher discipline policies. I think there's too much latitude given to our administrators who don't always make the right judgment calls. You know, consequences are one thing. I want to prevent this from happening again. I don't want to be back here asking why somebody made the wrong call. Put tougher discipline policies in place so that you take judgment out of the equation. So that, yes, I believe there need to be absolutes in cases as egregious as this. Sex offenders don't belong in our schools, period. And we need laws, we need policies that state that.
Chris, thank you. And I agree with that and 100%. Knowing, you mentioned knowing what we know now. Well, what we know, based on the young girl getting ready to come up, we know the details, and it's time that whether the board, I would hope, and Dr. Williams start calling publicly to fire the principal. That's what we need now. We know it. You have the information. That's what needs to be done. Because that's not the judgment that we want running our schools. Because she made the decision consciously to allow this sex offender in, and this is what happened. Collateral damage that can't be undone. So we know the details because of your reporting, not because of information that came out from the system. And the time is now to start calling on and letting us know, one of the delegates mentioned, who's going to be held accountable. Well, the time is now. We can't keep waiting to have real accountability after what happened.
All right, we now have the bravest young woman in the state of Maryland in here with us tonight. You are incredible. You know that. Thank you for coming to tell your story. You came forward in November, correct?
Yes. November of 2018.
Yes. And you warned the school administrators. I think that in itself is brave, right? And then nothing happened. Tell us about that. I'll hold it for you just to make it easier. No problem.
So in November of 2018, early in November 2018, I had a journal that documented everything that happened to me, which it wasn't pretty. And that journal was eventually found and turned in. And, Special Victims Unit, they came, they interviewed me, and I backed out at the last minute because I was scared. I didn't want my family to think it was their fault or know that this happened to me, because as a parent, that's your worst nightmare. And I didn't want my mom or my father or my other family going through that. And being told that he still had to go to school, that I still had to be in the same school as him, it definitely messed with my head for a long time. And even to this day, I don't want to go back to Parkville. I have thought about transferring, but I didn't want to leave my friends behind, if that makes any sense. But I'm here today for change, because now there is another child that's been hurt. And I told them when I reported Santino that I wasn't going to be the only one, that there was going to be another one somewhere down the road. And now there is. And now I want change, and I don't want this to happen to any other student in Maryland, because it could be your son, it could be your daughter, it could be your niece, your nephew. It could happen to any kid that goes to school, and it shouldn't.
Now, we want to be clear, there are now 3 underage girls who have come forward.
Yes.
1, there has been a conviction, which is why he's on the sex offender registry. A second girl has pressed charges, second underage girl, Baltimore County student. That is why he's in jail right now. And you have decided that you are going to press charges.
Yes.
Why did you come to that decision, and how hard was it?
It was seeing the third girl go through what I did. It made me realize I need justice too. The other 2 girls, they're getting justice, which I am happy for, but I need my own little trail of justice, as I like to call it.
You need it for your heart, your soul as well,
and for my
sure.
family,
and for your family, but you need it and you deserve it. If we can ask our panel, just hearing her story, we heard it in Chris's reports, but having her with us here tonight, it's emotional. And as educators and lawmakers, I'm sure it breaks your heart.
And as parents.
And as parents,
and
of
as
course,
parents.
yes.
Absolutely. I have 2 children in the public school system. I cannot begin to comprehend what you have gone through. And I want to thank you for coming forward. It took a lot of courage, but it means that we have to resolve to fix this. The burden is on those of us in positions of power to make sure this doesn't happen again.
So I can comprehend what you're going through, because I went through a lot of similar types of abuse like that as a child. And I understand what it's like to be afraid to tell anyone, and to be afraid to even tell school administrators, and especially to not want your family to find out, because this idea that you can be brave and protect your loved ones from what happened to you is very strong. And it is absolutely unconscionable that school administration did not do more to help you and protect you. And I can't understand why, other than just what you're telling us, but I'm very sorry that that happened to you.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you would like to say to the lawmakers or your educators tonight?
Please don't let this happen again, because this is going to affect me for the rest of my life. And yes, I've moved past that point in my life, but there's still damage that's going to take me another 10 to 15 years to go through, and I don't want any other kid to go through what I did. Especially what me and the girls went through, I wouldn't wish that on anybody at all. Just please don't let this happen again.
And I hope the school district offers her support and help through all of this and all of the victims as well. They owe it to them 100%.
Sure, and I would like to join my panelists in thanking you for coming forward. You are one of the most brave people I have met. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I can't imagine her going through this and the pain that you have been through. And thank you for your bravery. You have protected countless numbers of students by coming forward and sharing this with us, and we are acting to make sure that this does not happen to anyone else. Thank you.
They've got your backs, right?
And I echo everything that was said, and I appreciate you sharing your story as well. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart that I think I speak for a lot of people. We're praying that you can keep continuing to get stronger. And from the bottom of my heart also that I apologize that there are people in the same field that I am in terms of being elected and in public service that let you down, and they let not only you down, your family down, they let other students down, and they let the taxpayer down as well. We're all in this together, and it should have never happened, and for that, I really am sorry, and I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that if there's anything any of us can do, because we're all on the same team, we want to do whatever we can, and you're probably doing more than anything to make sure this never happens again.
She's so strong. You are so strong. Incredible.
Yes. Thank you for coming. Now we have been trying to get answers on this for about 3 months. We first learned about what happened in early December when it was posted on Facebook. And then throughout January, we were trying to get answers. We have reached out to Dr. Williams a number of times and also the principal. We had gone to the school 2 times to talk to the principal, and she was just on the other side of the wall from us. She could have come out and she could have spoken to us and answered our questions. She didn't. Here's a little bit about what happened. Does she just have 1 minute? We just want to ask her why she allowed a 21-year-old convicted sex offender to take classes in this school. Yeah, we feel like this is a question that parents and students deserve to have answered. So we're willing to wait as long as we have to for her to get done with her meeting and come out and talk with us.
I'll pass that on to her.
Okay, so we can wait?
You can wait. I'll see what she says. She will not be meeting with you. I don't know how else to make that any clearer to you.
Now, we have already mentioned that there is a third underage girl who had come forward, a 15-year-old who's a Parkville County student, which is why Santino Sudano is in jail tonight, awaiting trial on a number of charges, including second-degree rape. This is the mother of the 15-year-old girl.
Thank you for coming and being here. You're brave as well, and so is your daughter.
And why did you decide to come tonight?
I decided to come tonight because I wanted answers that I feel like Mr. Papst here got. I called the school. I got a phone call from a vice principal who basically talked in circles, would not answer any of my questions. Unfortunately, I'm ashamed to say I'm a Parkville graduate. I wish I could have went to the school myself, but I didn't think I would get anywhere, so I didn't do it. I tried, finding out how to get in touch with some superintendent people, and I tried to find out, what would happen if he was to be released.
Does she just have 1 minute? We just want to ask her why she allowed a 20.
I believe the principal should be fired. I believe that Dr. Darrell Williams should step down. I believe he has done us a grave injustice, and no one has ever told me why. Why was he given permission? What makes him so special that nobody cared? A girl comes forward, nobody cares. My daughter comes forward, now he's in jail? Now? What is it going to take before anybody cares? Does anybody in this room feel any other misery that me and these 2 girls feel? It's not right. How could anyone let this happen? No one wants to hear about a sex offender giving out Halloween candy, anything, but you all let him go to a school and give him a hunting ground. My daughter is not a Parkville student, but if she was, I'd be even more terrified than I am now. And that is shameful to have to say. And I'm not blaming you people up on the stage, because to be honest, you have been decent. But what about Dr. Williams? He doesn't answer. Astorita doesn't answer. The other two people, they don't answer. But they make tons of money and they make decisions that involve other people's lives. These children are ruined. They are going to be years before they recover. I have, there's 3 students. One's Parkville and 2 are from the same neighborhood. Turned out, unfortunately, we all knew each other, but we didn't know that at the time. How sick is that? Nobody cared enough to call me back. A principal can't call me back and say, I'm sorry this happened to your child. Mr. Williams can't call me back and say, I'm sorry this happened to your child. How hard is that to just call and say, I'm sorry? The only people that say, I'm sorry, are this gentleman sitting on the end. The only one that said, I'm sorry this happened. And, that's, it seems like there's people on TV that care. I know Mr. Papps cares, and some other people at Fox Baltimore, but who on the stage can honestly say that Dr. Williams is doing his job? Why is Astorita still working? I don't understand. I really don't understand it. How many other students does it have to be before somebody does something? Or, if you don't want to fire her, something, anything that makes her understand. She had the chance to put him out several times, and she did not do that. Nobody seemed to care.
Well, in defense, I believe all 4 panelists did say that they were sorry that.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I apologize.
It's okay.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. But, like I said on TV, I have a child who's a victim now, and I have to care for her. And all I wanted to know was, why did she sign that piece of paper? And if she had a child in that school, would she have still signed that piece of paper?
The 2 people who could answer some of your questions that deserve to be answered, they're not here tonight. But let's see if you can ask a question of one of our panelists tonight, in your quest to get some answers here.
Okay. Can someone tell me why a sex offender was even allowed to be in the school? Not just before the first victim came forward, but after he was arrested and convicted. What gave him the right to come back to that school? What was so special about him?
I can answer from my opinion was that a school principal made the decision that his right as a sex offender overrode the right of your daughter. And that's why I said earlier, because of that type of disgustingly terrible judgment, that principal needs to be fired, because that's what happened. They met, and I want to add also that the legal counsel that advised her, the principal, should also be fired, because they made the decision that his right, although already convicted for raping a 13-year-old, actually was more important than the innocent girls, 14 all the way up into 18. Not to mention he was 19, then 20 and 21 and still going on. But that's why, because their lack of judgment. I don't know the individual. I can't say that she did it on purpose, obviously, but she made a terrible decision, and it backfired immensely, which is why we're all here, to make sure, or to figure out why, but to make sure it never happens again. And that's all I can think of, is that type of just terrible judgment.
If you guys don't mind. Yes. And forgive me in advance, but I want to know, why is he still a student at the age of 21?
Good question.
Because, and I have a really good reason for asking this question.
I do know the answer, unfortunately, but I have nothing to do with this. But from what I understand, the law says if you start when you can go up till 20 years old, and then if you're turned to 21 in that same school year, then you're allowed to stay.
Now, when you say that same school year, exactly what time frame are we talking? Are we talking June 30th? What do you mean by that, if you don't mind me asking?
That's just what I was told. I don't know all the details, but
either one of you two on the Board of Education know the answer?
We have enrollment dates, and so if the calendar goes by the enrollment date. So if you start the school year and you're 20, and some point in that school year you turn 21, you're allowed to finish out to the end of the school year.
Okay, well, can I give you an example? Maybe this might help answer this question for me. suppose you have a son that's 20 years old and he's supposed to graduate. Somebody overlooks a credit by half a credit because he came from another state. He turns 21 on June 26. He's in a Baltimore County non-public school. And they're telling me there's nothing they can do because as of the 30th of June, it's nothing they can do because he'll already be 21. And I don't understand how a sex offender can be in a school, but my son can't get a diploma over half a credit from moving from another state. But a sex offender at 21 can still be in a school?
Well,
that does not make sense.
Well, and I think absolutely. And as a parent, the 21-year-old is in school with young girls at the age of 13, 14 years old. Does there need to be a change then in state law or in school policy that this doesn't happen? It makes no sense to the rest of us out here. You just
There is also an indicator. I also understand that if a student has an IEP, that student can also stay in school a little bit longer. I believe the law.
And that's what I was going to say. That's IDEA, which is a federal law.
Yeah.
So the school system isn't just, everything we do has to comply with state and federal laws. So when you have federal laws that say certain things, that takes the judgment out of our hands personally, and we have to just do what the law says. So there are many different individual situations for each student. It's hard to do hypotheticals because you don't have just one student that's just this or just this or just this. You have students that are combinations of different things that apply with different laws. And IDEA is a federal law that we have to follow that guarantees special education students education rights in the schoolhouse up to a certain age.
But we can
Ms. Hunt, did he have to be in the school building? There's e-learning, there's other situations. I understand he does have this right to education, but there's got to be some other form.
There are options, and that's what the board's looking at. So the second part of the question had to do with board policy and what we can do, and why did this happen? There's room for judgment that I think needs to be removed from our policy. Where permission can be granted for these students to be in our schools in the physical building.
There should be no gray area.
We have e-learning. We have alternate placements. There are options where we can do both, where we can provide the appropriate public education that all students are entitled while still protecting our students. And our policies need to move that direction where we're doing a better job protecting all of our students as well as protecting the rights of these individuals.
And I agree with Julie, and I'm on the policy review committee, and we are reviewing these policies. And I would encourage everyone to also lobby their legislatures for where there's laws that need to be changed as well. But at this point, I think there comes a point in time where you have to ask yourself, is what we're doing, does it make sense? And it just doesn't make sense for students who are violent to be in the schoolhouse with the rest of the students. And we're here talking about adult sex offenders, but what no one's talking about are the juvenile offenders.
Yes.
And the Department of Juvenile Services, which is a state department, only prosecutes 10% of arrests. And if they don't prosecute, and then those students stay in our schools, no matter what they did. And we have laws that dictate we can only suspend students for a certain number of days, and we can't suspend students for things they've done outside the schoolhouse. It would be nice if the lawmakers would get together and see what the culmination of all these laws looks like in practice in a schoolhouse. Talk to the school officials, talk to DJS, talk to DSS, talk to each other, and develop policies and laws that actually make sense for how they play out in the classroom.
We have gone so far toward privacy and confidentiality and away from protecting our students and educators and informing parents of what they need to know. I asked the Department of Juvenile Services 2 years ago how many students had ankle bracelets in our public school system. And we got a letter back saying we couldn't get that information. I wasn't asking for the names. I was simply asking for the aggregate number of students. And that should be basic information that you all should have the right to get.
Now, in addition to
Sorry, Chris. The board can't even get that information. I asked for the number of students in this category of violent offenders that are in our schools, and we were given the number of reportable offenses. Well, that's not the information I requested. So if we're talking about our lawmakers having great, good data to work with and to understand the bigger picture, they need data to understand the impact in our classrooms of the laws that are on our books.
So there's a couple points here that we can make. So we already know that there's a number of new legislative agendas that are being legislation that is being introduced in Annapolis. We know that you guys are looking at changing policies. Today, I talked to the state's attorney, and he has also changed some of his own policies here in Baltimore County, that he is going to change the way that DJS and he inform the school system of convicted criminals that are in the school system. Because from my perspective as a journalist, I am simply blown away that I cannot find out how many convicted criminals are in our public schools. That is astounding to me.
Yeah, I don't know that
can't
either.
figure that out.
We can't either.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
But as you guys as school board members, how can you not know that?
Theoretically, as school board members, we can ask the superintendent and ask the staff to get the data. But in some cases, the school system depends on the data coming from other sources. It's entirely possible that you could have a student in a school that's convicted of something and the school might not even know, because if the SROs don't know, if DSS didn't tell the school system, we have too many agencies that operate in silos and don't communicate well with one another, and we need to change that.
I think what was most shocking to our viewers and to a lot of us was the fact that a 21-year-old convicted sex offender can be in class and parents got no notice. They weren't informed. That just does not make sense.
And we know.
That's right.
And we know that the principal knew about it because she signed off on it. So we know the school knew. The school administrators knew he was in that school, and it still doesn't make sense that parents weren't
That's exactly
alerted.
what I asked Dr. Williams a week ago, was why weren't they informed in advance? Because this was a massive decision that you're making, and you're taking an extreme risk to allow this sex offender in there. Don't you think that people should have been known? And maybe just public backlash would have stopped this before it happened, because it was a very, very big gamble, and it didn't pay off.
Right, it was a bad
You can't gamble
decision.
with young girls' lives like that, and that's what happened.
If we can, we're going to continue to bring in voices of our community out here. Tell me your name and what you'd like to ask.
Hi, my name's Nicole Landers, and everyone on the stage knows me well. I've been advocating for over 2 years since my 5th grade daughter was sexually assaulted at Pine Grove Elementary. I still don't have answers for why that student was allowed to sit with her in sex ed and math class after a sexual assault.
And you went to authorities, you went to the school, you did everything you could possible.
I did everything, all the way up to meeting with U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, petitioning for help. Though any of you know that Secretary DeVos put into effect increased opportunity for victims through the Office of Civil Rights through Title IX. I've made contact with the leadership and asked for help in this county and in the state.
And you have also started your own network, a parent-to-parent network.
I have. And all of our efforts and all of my advocacy for 2 years begging the system and legislators across the county and the state and even nationally has not prevented more students from being harmed.
When you heard or saw Chris's story at first, your mouth must have just dropped, knowing the pain that the student was going through.
Absolutely. From my own child, I'm mortified. I'm mortified that somehow these students and teachers are subject to these kind of environments every day. If any one of us as parents subjected our children to these environments at home, we'd have Child Protective Services beating on our doors.
You are an advocate. What do you want to change?
I think everyone here is on board that changes need to be made. And I think that you guys are going in the right direction. And I agree that common sense needs to be restored. What I want to understand tonight is my husband came and addressed the board several weeks ago and asked for the parents and teachers in this county not to know names, but what schools have convicted felons and sex offenders, not names, not identifying data, but at least a way for parents to be able to prepare their sons and daughters in those schools to increase the likelihood that these children can stay safe.
So are schools hiding behind this rule that they can't disclose this information?
FERPA.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something that I've asked for, that information as well. I said, tell me what the process is for notification. And another board member who's not here tonight, we asked these questions. We said, what is the process? Because if you don't know what the process is, how can you fix it? And clearly something is broken and needs to be fixed. And we were told that there is a limited notification of sex offenders in our schools as far as who knows. Why aren't parents notified? Even teachers who teach these individuals aren't necessarily notified if they're not within a given team. How can that be? We not only need to protect our kids, we need to protect our staff.
That's right.
So we're talking with the superintendent. We are pressing him to look at these processes and to address these gaps.
We have another question from our audience, if that's okay.
Hi, I'm Teresa Solito. I'm a parent, and I'm also a teacher for Baltimore County Public Schools. And we know about this case because he is an adult. However, I want to know, as a parent and an educator, when will all the students of any age that are sexual offenders be removed from the schools? Because it's taking too long for common sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It is taking too long for common sense. It really, really is. It's time.
And I think that's what your bill does. It
that's
removes
what
all
we're
of them
trying
from
to
the
do.
schools.
If you've been convicted, that's the hope here with this new bill, is to make sure that they will not be in class. I mean, that is the goal, and like I said, I think we're all on board. It's bipartisan, and we need to get it done. If we do one thing in Annapolis this session, that's probably the most important thing, because more important than school funding is school safety. What's the point of funding schools if you're not going to have an environment that's safe for students to learn? And that's why we have to get this done.
And this is all happening in the backdrop of the Kerwin Commission, which is about to increase by $32 billion over the next 10 years, the amount of money going into Maryland and public schools.
And without changing,
and with this amount of transparency that we're seeing here tonight, or the lack of transparency, how do you justify that?
Exactly. And I don't want to go too much into detail, because that's a town hall in itself right there with the Kerwin Commission, but very little does it deal with school safety, with school discipline in that entire bill. That's going to spend $32 billion over 10 years. Very little with school safety, which needs to be the #1 priority.
We have 1 minute left. Ms. Henn, final thoughts.
Sure, we just finalized our operating budget, and my question was, how do we ensure that we have adequate funding for alternate placements to move these students out of our general classrooms and into the settings where we can protect our general education students? That is an answer we did not receive, but we're going to continue to press for so that we can ensure that that happens.
Well, one thing is guaranteed. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Chris Papps is going to continue to do these stories. That is guaranteed, because it is making a difference.
Plenty more stories coming up on this, and we always want to hear from you. We get these stories from viewers. This story was sent to us on a Facebook page, sent to me. That's how we found out about this. That led to all of this. New laws, new policies through the state attorney's office to Baltimore County Public Schools. It's because of you sending information to us.
And change is happening. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm Mary Bubala.
I'm Chris Papst. Thank you. And this has been a Project Baltimore Town Hall.